You're listening to JargonFree Radio.
Hi, it's Steve B here again, JargonFree Radio. As usual, we're seeking out good guests that can give you an insight into what's going on in the UK pensions industry these days. And today we're in the Berkeley Square offices of Now Pensions, and our guest, I'm very pleased to say, is Morten Nilsson, the Chief Executive of that new company. Morten, hello.
Hello.
It's nice to see you. We've met a couple of times already recently, and this is the latest Danish invasion. I've heard it described as, but this time it's our pensions you're after. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, and we're here to stay this time. Yes. So we're trying to bring in some of the things that have worked quite well in Denmark to the UK on the pension side.
So from the outside, you've seen the massive changes that are going on here, the structural changes to our pension system. With half the working population, well, not just under-saving, but not saving at all in a pension. You've seen Nest created essentially by the legislation, and you've come in to give them a good run for their money. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I think we've seen that all this change, all the reforms in the pension area here in the UK, and all the people not saving, as you say, and it's making this market very interesting for us. And I think another element has been that we've seen the UK market as being too expensive, and the investment choices haven't been always what we would have expected. So from that point of view, we've seen this is a very interesting market that where we might be able to offer our expertise.
Now that is something that I remember speaking to you about nearly a year ago when I think we first met, and. You were talking then about the investment structure that you've been used to in Denmark, where it's been very successful, a different market but very successful, and you were very strong on this investment thing then. What is it about the investments that, is it the way you invest, or what is it that you think you're bringing in terms of difference?
I think we have to begin with one very different approach to investments in a DC environment, and that is we don't believe in choice is good. So the first thing is, if we can offer one good fund, then we can make it a lot easier for the members, and that fund will have the size and the scale and the ability to be quite sophisticated. So the first thing is to focus on doing it, having a simpler fund structure from the seen from outside, to enable us to do a lot of good things within that fund structure. And I think the other element for us has been that it's all risk driven. So we don't believe in asset allocation, we believe in risk allocation. So we believe in diversifying the risks we take, being very clear on only taking risks, investment risks that are being rewarded, and getting rid of other kinds of risks we don't like. So
most people, I guess, that are in pension schemes, particularly DC pension schemes, which are becoming the norm now. Our world's changed here enormously in the last 30 years. So DC schemes are becoming the norm. Most people just go into the default funds, really, don't they? So there's a lot of trust on behalf of the people joining pension schemes, and a lot of responsibility, I suppose, on those building those investments for them. And you rarely meet somebody, I think, who would say they would be happy to gamble with their pension savings. It's something you can only save once in your life.
Yeah, but I think still I agree with that point. But I think what we're seeing is that. To be able to create real value on the investment side, we need to make sure that people are in the right option at all times throughout their life of savings.
So you constantly monitor them while they're saving.
Yeah, and adapt to how close they are to their retirement. And I think one of the things that has been working quite well in a Danish context has been to be able to level out also the interest rate risk of buying an annuity. So you don't happen to have to retire at a time where your pot is low and the cost of the annuity or the pension you're buying is high. So kind of leveling out some of that is one of the things we've been doing.
You're listening to Pensions Radio with Steve B and special guest Morten Nilsson, Chief Executive of Now Pensions.
My guess is I don't know much about the Danish system, except I think it's driven by legislation from what I understand. I mean, you are required, are you, to have a pension?
It's partly, there's a state pension similar to the UK state pension, and on top of that there's an ATP pension which is mandatory by law. So it's automatically enrollment, but you can't opt out.
You can't opt out.
But on top of that, again, this is just you could say an old age poverty protection, the ATP pension. So on top of that you have labor market pension and other pensions. Okay. But they are, for most people, they are in fact also mandatory, but by collective bargaining agreement or other ways.
So it's a bit like we had with SERPs and S2P, but it's funded.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a funded vote. The sort of thing, actually, that you probably wouldn't know this, but perhaps you do, but a chap called Keith Joseph tried to impose something like that back here in 1974, but it didn't happen. The so-called state reserve scheme that he was going to introduce then, effectively compulsory contracting out of the second tier and investment of that money. Yeah. As an outsider, sorry, I will speak of you as an outsider, but I know you're a knowledgeable outsider. You understand a different pension system to ours, but you've seen enough things here that interest you. You've come into our pension system, but we're all embroiled in this thing, so we find it quite normal, because it's all we've ever known. My guess is it doesn't look that normal to an outsider. One thing you've already touched on there, this odd idea, I think, of people employers being required to put employees into pension schemes, but employees not being required to stay in there. But if they come out, the employer's required to put them back in again. It's not just me, is it? That's crazy, isn't it?
It would have been easier to make it mandatory, I think, from that point of view. But I guess that's how you've decided to do it. I think the point from which I think most pension people agree on is everyone needs to save for their pension, and they need to start as early as possible. And how we get to that point is you can either enroll, opt out, and be re-enrolled a few times. That's one way of doing it.
Until you get the hang of it.
Yeah, till you give up and say I don't want to fight it anymore, or you can make it mandatory. But I think in my view people need to start to save. And also I think the point is that there's never a good time to save. You come out, you're young, you have student loans, then if you ever pay them off, then you start to get mortgages because you buy a house or you get children. There's never really a good time to save. So you might as well just get on with it.
Because the best way of saving is if you don't realise you're doing it. I mean, I've spent most of my life as an employee. I'm not an employee now, but I spent most of my life as an employee, and my employers have always run pension schemes, and so I've never been used to the money. I'm very grateful now I'm older that happened. My guess is that if I could have had the money instead when I was younger, I'd have probably opted to have it. But employers have got a big role to play in this, haven't they, in helping us save for our pension.
Yeah, I agree. But I think also for one of our points is that the idea of engaging people in pension we think is a bit difficult, because what most people actually want is the experience you've had, that you're taken care of. Then you don't have to worry too much about your pension. You have to do all these different investments. It's just being taken out for you and you're protected. And that means, of course, that the ideal pension for many people would be something DB-like, but we're not there yet anymore. But I think what I expect to see is that we have DB arrangements where we start to see more of the DB techniques being used to give people a bit of that comfort.
Now, that already happens in America, doesn't it, where they have these cash balance schemes, I think people call them there. It's something that's never really caught on over here. But is that close to, I think, what you're saying with your now approach? That if you're in a DB scheme, like I had been, and I'm now the beneficiary of, nothing for me to worry about, because my employer has promised me a fixed benefit that I can even calculate the nearer I get to retirement. And they've taken on the risk of the annuity rate, the mortality risk. And they've also taken on the investment risk. So I've got nothing to worry about. If I'm in a DC plan, I get the worry of the investment risk, something that you're probably right, people don't want to be bothered with. And I also have the worry that when I get to retirement, how far will that money go in buying me an income? So I've got the mortality risk and the investment risk. Yeah. It would be fine, I think, if I knew I was heading for retirement and my employer said to me, look, I'll tell you what, don't worry about where the money's coming from. When you get to retirement, I'll give you 10 times your salary as a lump sum to buy an annuity with. That is a DB scheme where some of the risk is borne by the employer and yet the mortality risk is borne by the employee. I've always thought those sort of schemes ought to really catch on because it's the sort of thing that brings pensions to life a bit. You know, in fact, you'd want 20 times your salary to get a decent final salary pension. Yeah. You know, if you say, well, I've got a 2/3 final salary, it's so what? 20 times my salary the day I retire sounds great, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I think the only thing I have is, I think the best way is if you can get the employer out of the equation.
Oh, really?
So the employer is contributing. So I think and it is an employee benefit you're offering your employees, but you don't have any financial risks as an employer apart from contributing.
So you make the contribution, and then your funds themselves take those risks away. Is that what you're saying?
So I think the ideal is if you can have a pension fund that can relieve you of that sponsoring role, but give some of the same comforts as you had in your DB scheme. I think is quite interesting.
You're listening to Pensions Radio with Steve B and special guest Morten Nilsson, Chief Executive of Now Pensions.
What you're talking about here is probably the right word is radical in this market. How's it going down? I mean, not just with the initiated insiders in the pensions industry, but outside. Is it an easy message for you to take to market?
I think that what we are seeing is we've been talking to a lot of employers in all sizes. So small employers, medium-sized employers, big employers, very big employers, and I think and from all industries actually also. And I think what they like is the simplicity. So it's quite simple. It's they can see that it's fairly easy to communicate to their employees because they can talk about the really perhaps easy stuff to explain, but also quite relevant stuff. What's going in? What are you contributing? Is it enough? Do you want to contribute more? Do you have other pots you want to transfer in? Do you have the right beneficiaries mentioned? And all these things that are fairly intuitive, and the employees will not shut down of all these investment choices. And I think the other thing is that when we look at again the results of ATP, they've been doing 7.4% in average for the past 10 years in investment returns, and did 26% last year. So they've been doing consistently more than the average. And I think that a lot of the people we're talking to like the idea of having an investment approach that is trying to aim at getting long-term stable returns. So it's this stable building up of your pot rather than you have excessive returns one year and the next year you fall out. Yeah.
Did I cash in at the right point?
Exactly. So trying to get a bit more stability into it, I think that comes down quite well also.
Are you a big company or a small company? I'm sorry, I don't know, but I'm guessing that you're relatively small here compared to where you've come from.
We are.
I mean, is it member communication you're involved in?
Yeah, we are. I think what we are looking at is the decision makers. We're aiming our communication at is mainly the employers and the advisors. But what we're building below that is all the member communication and making sure that is consistent and easy to understand and works as well as you would expect. But again, I think we're a bit blessed with all this simplicity because it's fairly easy to communicate because it's how much are you contributing, what's your pot, how have your returns been, what were the costs, and that's
what people are used to here is complicated pensions, isn't it? We've tried our best over the years to simplify our pensions system, but I mean we've hopelessly failed in that, haven't we? What do you think of our system as a whole here? I mean, the pension system, we're used to it because we do exams in it and we understand all. In fact, we love it. Some people, it's something to keep us busy, isn't it? But what do you see it as a complex mess that really would you need to engage people with the complexity? I mean, you seem to me to be thinking clean cut, simple lines, simple communication. But pensions inherently, it is a complex area, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it is especially complicated over here compared to what I've been used to. So I think it can be simpler than it is right now. I think my experiences here is also that there are a lot of very knowledgeable people in the pension industry, and a lot of sophistication is built by trying to accommodate every need. But I think my opinion is that sometimes you end up focusing on the 2% that have these special needs rather than the 98% that are actually the majority, of course, but also if you can get those 98% right, then you can start to do the right thing for the 2%. But if it's the other way around, everything you do will be at the expense of the 98%, in my view.
No, I agree with that. I think, and I think maybe I think we over-engineer everything tremendously here. Just to finish off, really. I mean, you are new-ish to our environment, but you've been here long enough to have been putting yourself about a bit, haven't you, in the press and things like that. And you've even got involved in quite heated debates in the press about things like these active member discounts, as they're called, and things like that. Do they excite you that much that you've got to talk about them, or are you annoyed about some of the things you see here?
The English language is fantastic because active member discount. I had to think, what is that? But okay, that's actually a penalty. That's quite interesting.
Non-active member penalty.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there are some wording issues. But again, I think some of it is what I really do understand is that a company would want to make sure they are not liable for employees who have left them and don't have any costs related to employees who have left them. I fully respect that. Yeah. But from an administration point of view, having dealt with that, it's usually less expensive to administer a deferred member than an active member.
Well, it ought to be.
Yeah. So from that point of view, I think it's a bit odd.
Well, thanks for that. Look, I think with the big message that we're picking up here is that simple is better than overly complex, and that maybe the big changes that are going on here might involve some good ideas coming to us from other pension systems. Morten, thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to JargonFree Radio, brought to you by Little Voice Media, the video and audio specialists.